So how's it feel
What?
to be so close to the site of your shame?
Hate that
Boston
building.
girl.
Hate that building. Just kidding. Please still let me in.
Welcome to Oddball. Welcome to Oddball. The NBA is going crazy.
Awooga.
Charlotte Wilder, Amin Elhassan, we're both in Miami, so you know it's going to be a fun show.
Woo.
We're going to be going to Celtics Heat tomorrow. We're going to be seeing Terry Rozier make his debut, perhaps.
Against the Celtics. Very fun.
But before we get to that, we got to get to the wildest, craziest story of the week. It is Adrian Griffin, head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, relieved of his duties after a mere 43 games. They had the third best record in the league, Charlotte. They had the same record as the defending champion, Denver Nuggets, and yet the Bucks gave him the old heave-ho.
Time to go, Adrian.
Yeah,
I hear that's exactly what they said.
That's what they said?
Yeah, my reporting says they said, Adrian, time to go.
Was the guy smoking a cigarette and flipping a coin when he walked up to him with a fedora on and like a pinstripe suit?
No, that was his associate.
No.
He sounded more like, Adrian,
see?
thanks for your help, but time to go.
Time to go.
His friend had an ascot on.
An ascot.
You know, a male scarf.
I know. Sadly, I know very well what an ascot is. Jason Jackson likes to wear them from time to time.
Shout out
Shout
Jason
out to
Jackson.
Jax. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is this has happened. And a lot of people are saying, whoa, what kind of precedent is this? David Blatt, obviously, a few years ago, had the same situation, kind of roughly. He had coached a year, obviously, and gone to the finals. Starts the second year. They're 30-11. They're the number one seed in the East. They're presumably going to go back to the finals. And he gets fired right there at the 41-game mark, and Ty Lue becomes the head coach. In this case, we don't quite yet have a head coach yet. We'll get to that in a second. I know what you guys think of Doc Rivers. We'll get to it in a second. But, Charlotte, let's talk about why Adrian Griffin was let go.
Yeah. From what we could see from the outside, there was trouble in paradise. We saw Giannis go off about the defense. He literally said, what is our plan? We don't have a scheme. What's our structure? What are we doing here? We remember Bobby Portis.
All great questions.
All great questions. Remember Bobby Portis, who said he was like, before Adrian Griffin could tell him what he'd done, he was like, hey, man, you need to take accountability for the part you played in this. He also, from reports that I've read, they also, anyone who watched the Bucks, you were like, what happened to the defense?
Right.
What happened to the defense? They went from being a top 5 defense last year under Budenholzer to 22 in the league.
Let me pause you right there because I want to talk about something very specific that people have been bringing up and again, right? It's like, oh, of course you lose to Jrue Holiday, your defense is going to suffer. Yes, not to that extent. I want to explain something very, very specific about NBA basketball. If you are a great defensive player on the perimeter, particularly at guard, yes, you can make a defense better. Yes, that is a point of emphasis. But your impact on the rest of the floor, on making everybody else better, is limited. It's limited to, well, I've got the best perimeter guy. You guys don't need to help as much, so you guys can focus on doing other things in the back. That's cool, and it's positive. It does not lead to a cratering of that size. That's attributed more to, like, if we lost a big. Because a big, by virtue of being in the paint, under the basket, changes the dynamics of how everyone's doing things. Great example of this. Watch Oklahoma City, who are a good defense last year. This year, they're elite. Why? Because Chet Holmgren changes so much. Exactly. Not only that, but also being able to move, being able to switch, all those things. Given that Milwaukee has not one but 2 Defensive Player of the Year type players, Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo, that's more than enough with capable defensive players elsewhere. I know Dame's not Jrue Holiday, but it's not the sort of thing that creates that kind of drop-off. But as you were, continue.
Well, that's a huge part of it. Griffin had them playing up. They weren't protecting the rim the same way they had been. And Giannis, in the thing he said a few days ago, he was like, teams can get threes. They can go to the rim. They can basically do whatever they want. And I think that this is, obviously they have a great record, sure. But we talked about this a bit on the Levitard show. To me, it feels like they were winning despite Griffin. Dame would hit a last-minute 3 or Giannis would score 64 points. The Pacers ate their lunch multiple times. They almost lost to the Pistons.
It's like, imagine Usain Bolt running on one leg, right? And placing third and second in races and like beating Amin Elhassan, but barely, like by a nose. Like you could say, well, everything's great. He's winning. He's competitive. But we know that if he was running with two legs, he'd be smoking the competition. And this team was not running with two legs. And I want to make something very clear. This is not meant to be an appraisal and assessment of Coach Griffin's coaching acumen. Right? Perhaps the biggest, most important thing a coach can do is have the trust, control, and support and belief of his locker room. Mm-hmm. And if you do not have that, it doesn't matter how great of a coach you are. Right. You could be Red Auerbach, Phil Jackson, Eric Spoelstra, Steve Kerr, all rolled into one. If they don't believe in you, if they won't follow you, everything else falls on the wayside. Nobody cares about your X's and O's. Nobody cares about your lineups. Nobody cares about your sub patterns. Nobody cares about how great you are in the community. Nobody cares about that the front office love you and know you and are best friends with you or not, whatever. Nobody cares about those things if those 17 or so guys in that locker room don't believe in you.
And you know why? That's exactly it. And it's about leadership. It's about providing structure for your team. I'm not in that locker room. I don't know what Adrian Griffin was or was not doing. From what it looks like, there was a lack of cohesion, obviously. But when I think about this on sort of a more broader sports NBA coaching level, people crave boundaries. People crave expectations. If you are not setting the correct expectations for your players, if they don't know exactly what they're supposed to do, if there's conflict about how they're supposed to do it, that's going to tear something apart really quickly. And I actually think it was #brave of the Bucks to fire Griffin when they did, because a lot of people, we talked about being embarrassed yesterday. Yeah. A lot of teams, a lot of front offices wouldn't want to be embarrassed by, hey, we hired this guy 43 games ago and now we're getting rid of him. But that's exactly what I think they had to do once they realized that this thing was lost.
But here's the thing. Because he's a new hire and because he represents something different than what preceded him, you say you got to give him a chance.
Yep.
You got to give him a chance. You can't like tell him what to do. You got to give him a chance to do what he does, right?
Do you think the Bucks knew at training camp?
I think the moment him and Terry Stotts got in an argument, and this isn't meant to be a big defense of Terry Stotts, but just the idea that you are not even through camp and your lead associate head coach and you are bickering on that level in front of everybody. This isn't behind closed doors. Hey, Terry, I need you to do this. Or, hey, Adrian, I feel more comfortable if I do this. It wasn't that. They were doing this in front of the team. And that's a big no-no. That's like when your parents, you don't argue in front of your kids, right? You might say, we'll talk about it later. And then you talk about it later. But you don't argue in front of the kids because it fractures their trust in you know what you're doing. You couldn't even get along with your own associate head coach. How am I supposed to believe that you know what you're doing? But I digress. We move on to perhaps whose replacement is going to be, right? So last night on Inside the NBA, Adam Lefkoe passed along a report by CNN that said that Doc Rivers is indeed going to be the next head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. Chris Haynes, a Bleacher Report in TNT, kind of said, well, not quite yet. They're still talking. Shams, all the other newsbreakers that we know of have kind of, well, it's not quite there yet. But this anonymous CNN report, because they didn't tell us who at CNN
That's one of the weirder things that's happened in a while. I was like, wait, what? Who hit? How?
I have Wolf Blitzer being the guy. He's a huge Wizards fan.
Wait, really?
Wolf Blitzer is a huge Wizards fan, right? He's a huge NBA fan. I think probably either him or my guy Boris Sanchez, those are the two biggest NBA fans
You
at
think
CNN.
Someone called him up and was like, hey, you want a scoop? And they were like, sure, if we don't put my name on it?
I'll say I think it's Wolf, because if it was Boris, he would have hit me up. That's right. That's a name drop that I just had right there.
Okay, Louis.
Shout out to Boris.
Okay,
but
Louis.
Here's the deal. A lot of people are saying, wait a second, Doc Rivers, didn't we just get done doing this kind of shame parade on him and how awful he is as a coach? First of all, he's not awful as a coach, right? In order to get to Game 7s, you have to be good enough to blow. In order to blow the Game 7s, you have to be good enough to get to Game 7s. In order to blow 3-1 leads, you have to be good enough to get a 3-1 lead, right?
Did he do that 3 times?
Yes, he's done that more than anyone in the history of the game. Yeah. Not a great thing to have on your resume, but I always emphasize, you have to be good enough to fail like that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't even get to that point.
That's a great point.
Doc's won a lot of games with a lot of different teams. What Doc Rivers in general brings to the situation is he walks in, and I've seen this with so many veteran head coaches. They walk in, they know exactly what they want to do. We're going to run this. We're calling this play this. We're going to defend like this. On the sideline, we're pushing them this way. On high, we're showing like whatever it is. They have very clear ideas of what they want to do and what their terminology is, and what they want everyone's role to be. And in situations like this where players feel lost and rudderless, someone coming in saying with structure and like, I have an idea, I have a plan, people gravitate towards that. So Doc comes in with that. Doc comes in with credibility. Shaq talked about this last night on TNT. Because Doc has been to the promised land, there is a feeling of, well, I'm going to give him the time of day if I'm not quite sure about a certain thing. Adrian Griffin, first-time head coach. If I'm not sure about this, I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, when have you ever tried this before?
Right.
You're spitballing just like the rest of us.
Right.
Whereas with Doc, there is an element, well, he's been around.
And he was advising Adrian Griffin.
That's the third part, right?
Which is interesting.
So, reports are at the after the in-season tournament, after they lost the Pistons in the semifinal, Doc Rivers was brought in to advise Adrian Griffin, presumably in that kind of role, maybe not full-time like Terry Stotts was going to be, but we talk about this all the time. First-time head coaches typically have an associate head coach who's been a guy who's been a head coach somewhere else to show them the ropes and help them along. When Steve Kerr was the head coach of the Warriors for the first time, his associate head coach was Alvin Gentry, a guy who had been a head coach in Phoenix and in Miami and New Orleans and Detroit, and the Clippers. So there's a feeling that Alvin could help Steve with some of the idiosyncrasies that maybe might be escaping a new first-time head coach. And over time, you figure it out. You figure out your voice as they speak, as they say. So Doc was brought in to do that. Somewhere along the lines, the thinking in Milwaukee has become, I don't think Adrian's getting it done. He lost the locker room. We got to get rid of him. Who do you like? Kind of like Doc.
Oh, well, he's had some good ideas.
It wouldn't be the first time in the NBA where people who are tasked with helping a situation end up saying, you know what? I got the perfect solution. Me. All right. Longtime viewers of Oddball, which can't be that long because we're less than a year old, but will know that I often kid around with Charlotte and I say, Charlotte, you're like a Marcus Smart acquisition away from becoming a Heat fan. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting a lot closer.
For the record, before you continue, this did not do it. I am a Celtics fan forever. You can continue.
Shaky. It's a little shaky.
It's not.
She's
it's
wavering.
not.
She's wavering.
It's
I'm
not.
I'm gonna see it on Thursday. She's gonna be there. She's gonna be rooting for her Celtics, and then like Scary Terry's gonna do something, and she's gonna be like, "Oh, I missed that."
I remember the T-shirts.
Oh man, there it is. So Terry Rozier of the Charlotte Hornets gets traded to Miami for Kyle Lowry and a conditional first-round pick. There's a lot of nerddom around the conditions on that pick because it's specifically worded in a way that they will not be prohibited from trading their 2030 first-round pick. But I digress.
Again, math. My brain.
A
marching band starts playing in my head when we get to the conditions.
Too deep in the weeds. We don't need to talk about. All we need to talk about is Terry Rozier coming to Miami, having a chance to win for the first time, basically since he left Boston. Returning what I would think is a bigger role than he had in Boston, but not quite as big a role as he had in Charlotte.
No, in Charlotte, he got to be the guy. He got to ball out and take responsibility.
And shoot a lot of shots and have high usage rates.
And now he gets to play for a team that has a chance to win. So seems like a better situation. I would rather be a smaller role on a team that could win than a big role on a team that's not winning.
So this is the interesting thing. So a lot of people are like, oh, no way, I want to be the man or whatever. But like once you have a taste of that, you've had it, you know what it feels like, and you realize, dude, it doesn't matter how good I play, I'm not good enough to make a bad team good.
Right.
It's easier in that moment to then take a step back and go back to being someone who fits in a role.
Which comes back to what we were talking about with the whole Buck situation, which is knowing your role and being cool with it, because if you do your role correctly, your team can win.
Absolutely. And I think Terry Rozier has a great chance to be that for the Miami Heat. A lot of people talk about his offense. The Heat offense has needed a lot of help They've been struggling, particularly with a lot of injuries. But even when those guys are healthy, if you look at it, there's still a middling offense, particularly in the half court. But I think defensively, he represents a massive upgrade over Kyle Lowry. He's a guy that can guard on ball, and that's incredibly important given that Tyler Hero is not a great defensive player, right? And Kyle Lowry, although he has his moments, particularly in taking charges, other than that, he's not a great defensive player either. So the Heat struggled to start those two guys. They ended up benching Lowry, bringing him off the bench, starting a bigger lineup around Hero. I think this gives them another really good ball handler, really good playmaker out of pick and roll, and a good three-point shooter, but more importantly, gives them someone who can guard on ball.
How much of a difference in terms of where the Heat, what do you think the Heat's ceiling was before this deal, and what do you think it is now?
I mean, I think we've learned that their ceiling is
the roof.
The roof, yeah. Shout out to Michael Jordan. Yeah. So it's hard to say. I know that today I feel a lot better about them than I did 24 hours ago. With this acquisition, I think they're a lot better. They're better positioned to compete against a Milwaukee if they get their stuff together, a Philadelphia, a Boston. Like, if you think about all those teams, there's someone that Terry Rozier can be an irritant to. The Knicks, who have also gotten better.
Yep.
The Pacers, who have also gotten better. Yep. The Eastern Conference is very interesting right now.
It's fun.
And so having a guy who can guard on ball against these pesky guards, the Halliburtons, the Maxis, right, the Damian Lillards, that's going to help them tremendously. On the other side of the ledger, Charlotte.
Yes.
The fire. No. There she is. The Hornets fire sale has begun.
Yep.
And they've got vets that other teams clearly want. They got Kyle Lowry, who they're going to attempt to flip again before the deadline.
We see a lot of that this year.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, these bad teams don't need these guys.
Right.
They just need something that they can turn into more assets, because they'll gladly take picks and young players for that in a way that Miami did not want to do that for Kyle Lowry. They wanted someone who could come in and contribute immediately. So, but Charlotte with the Hornets, the Wilders is what I was going to call them. The Hornets, the Hornets with new ownership, remember, Michael Jordan is no longer the main owner of the team. They're starting that reset, and they're starting to see, okay, what can we move around here as we build around Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball.
Shout out to the GameStop guy. Also, would you say...
Did you watch the movie Dumb Money?
No, not yet.
It's all right.
That's why I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah.
Would you say, I mean, that the Heat got scarier with got terrier and scarier?
Word count is next. Wednesday, Charlotte, get them paws up. It's word count. That's right. It's the game where we're asked questions. We have to answer them in 10 words or less. And Charlotte, how do we show the people that we've hit our 10-word quota?
We count on our digits.
There we go. That's easy.
Well, sometimes.
Sometimes. I have had a really bad run the last couple of weeks.
You've been going over.
Being flawless for months. I've been going over. So, yeah.
All right, redemption. This is redemption.
I need to bounce back. But this is how I'm going to shake things up. Because, you know, teams shake things up sometimes by firing coaches, sometimes by trading players. I'm going to shake things up by switching up the batting order here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want me to read to you first?
You're going to read to me first.
Wow. Okay. Amin, your first question. Monday night's Charlotte Hornets-Minnesota Timberwolves game featured 10 incorrect calls over the last 2 minutes, according to the NBA's L2M report published last night. Come up with an excuse for the refs.
Hey, this job is really, really hard. You try it.
Good one. Okay.
Right, that's 10, right? Yeah, I mean, look, that particularly the play that's on everyone's mind is that last play of Karl Anthony Towns driving and getting shellacked by 3 different people and no call being made on that play. Now, many would argue that the Timberwolves lost the game on their own accord. If you listen to their post-game press conference, Chris Finch did not talk about officiating at all. He talked about his team not having the right mentality and not having the right maturity. But be that as it may, you cannot ignore the refs screwed that one up tremendously.
Egregiously, yes.
Egregiously. It also reminds me that last night, Portland was in a situation against Oklahoma City where they had the ball and Chauncey Billups is calling timeout and the ref is not paying attention to him. And so they end up turning over, Malcolm Brogdon turns over the ball, and the Blazers afterward it was reported they're going to request a complaint.
Yeah.
So Charlotte, here's the fun part.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, what does that ever do? It's happened before. In 2008, the Miami Heat and the Atlanta Hawks played in a game in which Shaquille O'Neal got his 6th foul and had to come out the game with 51.9 seconds remaining. Upon further review after the game, the Heat ended up losing in overtime to the Hawks. Upon further review, it comes up that, wait a second, that wasn't his 6th foul, it was his 5th foul. So the Heat lodged a complaint. The league approves the complaint and decrees that they have to replay the last 51.9 seconds of that game because that's the moment where the incorrect thing happened, which was Shaquille O'Neal getting a 6th foul, which he did not have.
So did they fly to each other to play that again?
The next time they played in March, I think the game happened in December. The next time they played was in March. They first started with playing the 51.9 seconds.
Awesome.
And then started the second game after that. But I want to point out, I'm not saying that this is going to happen for Portland, that they're going to be awarded that timeout and replay, but I'm saying it does happen. It is incredibly rare because that one that in 2008, that's the last time I believe that happened. Before that, it hadn't happened since 1982. So we're talking about every 25 years or so.
So we're not quite due for one.
We're not quite
if my
due
math
for
is
one,
correct,
yeah.
but maybe it'll happen.
Charlotte,
yes,
your question. Marcin Gortat, the Polish hammer, told Hoops Hype, I mean, you know, when people box out, they'll try to grab your balls and squeeze. I swear to God, they do some crazy stuff. He also names Chris Paul by name as someone who does some of the testicular
I,
play.
for one, am shocked.
Yeah, who knew? What crazy tactics would be your go-to move if you were a big man in the NBA, Charlotte?
I would be so obnoxious. I'd make bad jokes constantly.
Wow, I like this.
I would. But I would,
give me
first of
one.
all, I would grab jerseys too, and I would just like be pesky and like squeeze the side, which is the worst
Love
place
handle.
to be squeezed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that little
like
goose-
tickle
that
them a little bit. I'd tickle them a
when you
little.
goose someone like
Yeah, ooh. It would be awful, and then I would just be like dad jokes, puns that weren't even good, like to the point I would have to memorize a lot of them. Where people would just be like, I can't be next to her anymore. I can't be next to her.
Room reading dad joke books and stuff.
It would probably work.
So someone who kind of did some of this stuff was Dennis Rodman.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite things is Dennis Rodman, whenever he would play against Alonzo Mourning, Alonzo Mourning was a very intense guy. Dennis would do things like if they're lining up at the free throw line, and let's say this is Mourning, and Dennis is over here, and that's the basket. This is the lane. The free throw shooter's over here. Dennis would line up like this. And just space Alonzo and or he would like put his hand on his thigh and then like Alonzo would slap his hand and then he just gently put it back there.
Yeah, like a cheek caress.
Yeah, like
who was it? Who blew in LeBron's ear?
Lance Stevenson.
Yeah, Lance
Stevenson blowing in the ear.
So good. It's all so good. It's like heckling. You can't actually say, you can't swear or be vulgar. You have to be creative.
You
have to like
work in the gray areas. There's Charlotte Wilder.
So good. Okay, I mean.
All right.
USA Basketball named a 41-player pool for the Olympic men's team.
That's a lot of names.
I know. Selected by Grant Hill, national team managing director.
Shout out to G Hill.
LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid. Besides those names, what would your next top 3 choices be to be included in the 12-man team from this pool?
Ooh, okay. This is where I would go. I'm always a believer in the next being a part of the current. So Paolo Banchero is my next there. Tyrese Halliburton, you know, I have a great admiration and fondness for him. That's 2. And the third, I guess I would go with Jimmy Butler because I think his ability to play multiple positions, can play up, play down, he's strong. He gets to the free throw line. He's physical, and international play is a lot more physical. I think I would go with him. So yeah, Butler, Banchero, and Halliburton would be my 3. But like you can't go wrong with a lot of these names. Bam is a great name there. Desmond Bane is a great name. Anthony Edwards is an amazing name. Right. You know, so you know.
I might toss in a Derek White or Jalen Brunson for a little like.
Yeah, I guess.
I feel like they'd care a lot.
I think Tyrese Halliburton cares.
Oh, not over Tyrese.
Oh, okay. There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, Charlotte, last one for you. So, this news kind of got buried happily, I guess, for this guy. Tristan Thompson suspended for 25 games for violating the league's anti-drug policy. He tested positive for ibutamorin, which is a growth hormone, and SARM LGD 4033, commonly used by bodybuilders and weightlifters for muscle enhancement, which is funny because Tristan barely plays. He's averaging 3.8 points and 3.9 rebounds in 12 minutes.
Awesome.
The question from our producers was like, how does Tristan Thompson, like, why is he even on a team with those kind of numbers? And I said, because he's a great guy. He's a great locker room guy. So, Charlotte, the question for you is, how good of a locker room guy would you be if you were in the NBA?
Again, incredible. 2 things I'd excel at: locker room heckling. Locker room and heckling.
Oh, so you're bringing in your answer from the first question.
Yeah, because look, I'd be great at heckling. I would do a lot for my team in that regard. They would be very grateful to me for being like, wow, Charlotte's really being a pest.
Right.
And she doesn't really care if she's seen as like the greatest hooper.
Yeah, there it is.
But
That's what it looks like.
she knows her role. She knows her role. Also, I would be great in a locker room. I would get everybody around me. I'd be like, you guys, we got to shape up. We got to do this. Love you. You're doing amazing. I would be positive and hold them accountable.
Yeah, I think you would be a great positive force in the locker room.
Thank you.
I can say that.
I could last 25 years in the NBA.
Only for that damn basketball part.
You know, dust is still in the air from you hitting that pillow.
Sorry, bye.
What?